Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Loving obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva, who alone is. Janmadyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsuraya tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna swena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation, made of three gunas, appear in him as though real, like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusory energy Maya. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amrutadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from Shuka Brahma Rishi. Go on drinking this nectar day after day. So now we are in the 15th chapter of the first Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We saw that Arjuna has come back from Dwaraka and Yudhishthira has already seen all omens and also got a clue from Devarishi Narada. And now, looking at the desolate face of Arjuna, he has put everything together and asks Arjuna to confirm indeed that Lord Sri Krishna has left the earthly abode. And with that, we now begin this chapter. Krishna's dear friend Arjuna, he was already looking dull, he was looking lean, he was not looking strong, and he was having a very gloomy face. His face and his eyes are lotus like and bright, but they were not bright now, and they were so dull and sad looking. And when Yudhishthira asked him all these questions, Arjuna could not even summon any answer. He was just overwhelmed with love and with the separation from his beloved friend, and he was recalling all the friendliness, all the goodwill, all the love that he has received all through from Krishna as a charioteer, as a friend, as a dear relative, and as a companion. And tears were welling up in his eyes, and he could hardly control them. He was wiping them away, and he felt completely silent. Interestingly, the same reaction is what Uddhava has when Vidura meets him. As we already saw, when Vidura came to take Dhritarashtra back, before that, Vidura met with Uddhava, and by then, already this event had happened. Krishna had left the earthly abode, and Uddhava too. We will see later this conversation between Uddhava and Vidura, and Uddhava falls completely silent for half an hour before he even opens his mouth when Vidura asks about it. And the same thing here, Arjuna is not able to speak. He is just choked with tears and he is silent for some time. There is just silence in that room. Bhima is there. His mother Kunti has come by now, and everyone is silent. And finally, Arjuna starts speaking and he says right away, "Hey, brother, hey, my king, I have been deprived of the holy company of my dear friend." That's the first thing he says. In Sanskrit, it's beautifully expressed. He says, Vanchitoham Maharaja Harina Bandhurupina. I have been deprived of the companionship of Hari, and therefore it has robbed me of all valor, all strength, all brightness. And because of this separation, it feels like I am a walking corpse. The body seems to have no life, and I am absolutely just moving along lifelessly without any energy. And once to think that I was feared even by the gods simply because of the strength that was given by Krishna to me, and now I'm deprived of everything. And then he pauses and then he starts recollecting all the ways in which Krishna has helped him. He narrates one after another. He says, when Draupadi was about to elect her husband through Swayamvara, and there was this very difficult competition wherein one has to hit a fish revolving on a wheel on the roof without looking at the fish, by simply looking at the reflection on a bowl of water. So one can imagine how difficult it is. There is a bowl of water down below, and it is reflecting what's on the roof, where there is a wheel in which there is a fish which is revolving. And one has to look at the water below and hit the roof above exactly in the eye of the fish. And that's exactly what Arjuna does. And he alone can do that because he's such a great archer, or so he thought. But he says now that that was only because Krishna was next to me, and the power I had because of Krishna's presence made me do it. Now the same hands is not even able to pick up the bow, let alone do such a challenging act. I conquered even Indra. I conquered all the Devatas, all the various kings and rulers, and even the Devatas were all afraid of me, or they were asking me for their favors. He recounts one incident where there was a demon called Maya who was saved by Arjuna from a huge forest fire. And because of that, Maya built for them a great palace because he is very expert at it. And this is something of an allusion to the fact that the demoniacal tendencies also have great skills. A lot of people, even on earth, these are all just symbolizing these kinds of tendencies. People who have great talents but use those talents for destructive purposes, when they are actually made to instead dovetail those talents for something useful, they can actually bring about something very valuable. Normally, they waste their talents in destructive, sense gratification oriented, or uh, just negative goals. But Arjuna says here, as an example, how he was able to use a demon's skills to build a palace simply by protecting him. He was able to even protect demons like that and bring them to serve a noble cause. He recounts how brother Bhimasena is standing right next there. He says, "Oh, brother Bhima, you remember when Jarasandha, who was a great king and a very evil king too, was causing a lot of problems for everyone. Then Bhima goes along with Arjuna and Krishna and they challenge him for a fight. And it's a very intense fight, goes on for many days. And finally, Krishna helps Bhima with a very important clue with which Jarasandha can be killed. It's a beautiful story where Jarasandha has to be literally torn apart and thrown to two different sides. That's the only way he can be killed, because he has a boon that if he is killed in any other way, he will get his life back. And Krishna reminds Bhima in the middle of the battle of doing exactly that, and thereby Bhima wins the battle. So Arjuna reminds again Bhima now, remember, you were able to win the mighty Jarasandha simply because of Krishna. Because Jarasandha had at the time kidnapped so many princes and he was about to offer them as sacrifice to Bhairava. There is this Lord, which is the uh, partial form of Shiva, to whom people offer sacrifices and they worship in a wrong way. And this is what Jarasandha was doing, and this was stopped, and he was killed so that all those princes can be protected. And this happened by Krishna's helping Bhima. So Arjuna reminds Bhima too how you were helped. And then he reminds Yudhishthira when Draupadi was humiliated in that court and her hair was touched. You know how Krishna made sure that all the wives of those people who touched her hair, their hair was untied as well. He is alluding to the fact that all of them were killed and therefore they had to undo their hair. And he says he saved us from Durvasa. He recounts another incident where Durvasa, who is a sage who is prone to get angry, but always doing so for bringing out the glory of the devotees. He seems to act out of anger, but the inner purpose is to bring out the greatness of devotees. So he comes once, and Duryodhana tricks him to go to the Pandavas to ask for food when he knows that the Pandavas do not have food now. Draupadi had just finished eating herself and set aside everything, and it was afternoon time, and Durvasa comes with 10,000 followers, and he is known to get very angry, and he says, I need food now. And Yudhishthira doesn't know what to do, so he says to him, please go to the river, take your ablutions and come back, we'll do something. But he doesn't know what to do. And as always, Draupadi prays to Krishna, and Krishna immediately appears there. And he says, out of the blue, I'm very hungry. And Draupadi says, oh, what is this now? I was trying to pray to you to how to feed Durvasa. Now you are hungry. I don't have any food. Krishna says, no, no, go look in the kitchen. You have something, look something. And then Draupadi goes in, she looks at the vessels, and then he says, bring the vessel. And then he finds that there is one small piece of vegetable still stuck to a vessel. Krishna takes that one small piece, that is last remaining piece, puts it in his mouth, eats it, and expresses satisfaction. And that very act makes all the 10,000 disciples of Durvasa and Durvasa himself feel completely full, and they simply vanish. So then Krishna asks Bhima to go find Durvasa, and when he goes there, he sees that they've all simply vanished because Krishna had made sure that their hunger was completely satisfied by him taking a small morsel. So Arjuna recounts this incident too and says, see how he protected us from this great calamity of Durvasa cursing us by coming at the right time. He even made me once win over Lord Shiva. So there's an incident he recounts where Lord Shiva, as a sport, came to engage in a battle with Arjuna along with his consort Girija, which is Parvati. And in this battle, Arjuna displayed his valor and he was able to win. And Shiva was mighty pleased and he gave him his Pasupatashtra, which is a very powerful weapon that Shiva blessed Arjuna with. This all happened only by Krishna's grace. Arjuna says, only because Krishna was next to me, I could even think of fighting with the mighty Lord Shiva and get his blessings. And now look at me, I am not even able to move this body. And I helped so many devatas, I helped Indra himself. I was able to cross the ocean of the Kaurava enemy. So he refers to the Mahabharat war, and he says that there was this ocean of Kaurava army filled with sharks, which are the great generals, starting with Bhishma himself, Drona, Karna, and he recounts all of them, Jayadratha, and every one of them I was able to defeat only because Krishna was next to me. And each incident that he recounts, every incident has wonderful help that Krishna provides, the great pastime. Jayadratha is a great example because it's so poignant. Jayadratha is a great warrior, but also a very evil minded one. And he was always after Draupadi to marry her, but he could not. She married Arjuna, as we saw. Arjuna won that battle, or won that election, that Swayambara, to win over Draupadi. And Jayadratha always wanted to revenge, get revenge against Pandavas. So when the battle happened, he sided with the Kauravas. And through trickery, they took away Abhimanyu, who is the son of Arjuna and who is the father of Parikshit, as we already saw. Parikshit was born after Abhimanyu died. Abhimanyu was tricked into the battle and he was cornered by all the generals. And Jayadratha had a boon. He had two boons. One was that one day he will be able to defeat the Pandavas. And the second was that anyone who makes his head fall down, he will be killed himself. So this is very beautiful story. Mahabharata has so many stories. This is just one small sample of how entertaining and and complex and involving all emotions, and at the same time symbolic of the essential nature of the human mind. It's such a ocean, and this small story will give us glimpse. So Jayadratha has these two boons, and therefore on that particular day he invokes the first boon by countering all the Pandavas so that they cannot reach the place where Abhimanyu is being cornered. And like a coward, Abhimanyu, or like cowards, Abhimanyu was killed by the generals of Kauravas, a young man. He was barely in his late teens, and he was killed unfairly by all the generals of Kauravas in a battle which was so unfair. And the Pandavas could not, the five brothers could not reach him because that one day Jayadratha was able to counter them. So Arjuna is now made aware of the news that his son has been killed. And Arjuna gets very upset and angry, and he makes a vow that by the end of the day today, I will kill Jayadratha, and if I do not, then I will commit suicide myself. This news goes to the Kauravas. They are all very happy to know this because all they need to do is protect Jayadratha for this one day. And if they do that, Arjuna will commit suicide. And if Arjuna dies, then the whole Pandavas are finished. So they are very elated and they go and hide Jayadratha away. And nobody is able to find him. And time is ticking away. And everybody is happy. So now Krishna does an elaborate, wonderful trick here that again shows how beautifully Krishna helps Arjuna at every step of the battle. He makes an eclipse happen at that time so that it seems like the sun has set prematurely, an hour or so before the real sunset. And seeing this, the Kauravas foolishly think the sunset has happened. And they all celebrate that now Arjuna is going to die, and they all come out, and Jayadratha comes out. And as soon as he comes out, the sun comes back again. And now he is in front of Arjuna. But not only that, now Krishna reminds Arjuna gently that remember he has the other boon, that whoever kills and puts his head down on the floor will be killed himself. So do wisely. Arjuna understands what he needs to do. Jayadratha's father is there too, somewhere in the battle, who is also evil and needs to be killed. So Arjuna takes a mighty bow, a mighty arrow, and knocks Jayadratha's head with such power that the arrow takes his head and takes it directly and puts it on his father's lap. And the father, without realizing that it's his own son's head that's coming toward him, pushes it away to the ground. And because the head comes from the hand of his father to the ground, his father is killed and Arjuna is spared. This is such a beautiful incident in Mahabharat war. And Arjuna recounts this briefly and says, this is one small sample, and there are so many ways in which Krishna guided me, helped me, and counseled me to win this war. And then he says, how stupid I was that I was still considering Krishna to be my charioteer when he was protecting me from all these enemies, and it was he who was actually running the show. I was simply just an instrument. And he gives a beautiful example. He says, just as Prahalad was not touched by any of the weapons that was hurled by his own father, Hiranyakashipu. This is a beautiful story that will come later, where Hiranyakashipu turns against his own son because his son would not listen to him and worship only Krishna or Narayana. And he wants to kill Prahalada, but whatever weapon he sends against Prahalada, nothing can touch Prahalada. And Prahalada finally is saved, and Narsimha appears and kills the evil father. Now, this story is invoked by Arjuna to say, just as Prahalada was not touched by a single weapon, similarly, not a single weapon could touch me. I was so securely protected by Krishna. He gives a very particular example. These are all beautiful images from the war that Arjuna now recounts. He says, when my horses were thirsty, what Krishna or what Arjuna does at the time is he has to get off because the horses cannot move. And with his mighty power, he is able to put an arrow into the earth with such force that water springs out of the earth and the horse's thirst is quenched. But while all this is happening, Krishna is protecting Arjuna because he says, I didn't realize that when the horses were drinking water, I was on the ground and I could have been easily attacked. But Krishna, simply by being next to me, created such an effulgence that nobody could dare come next to me. This is how wonderfully he protected me at every step of the way. All the warriors who came in front of us, he simply by looking at them took away their lifespan. And yet I was simply joking with him, playing with him, thinking that he was simply my friend. And he recounts all of these incidents where he calls him, hey friend. So Arjuna was addressed by Krishna so beautifully as hey Partha, hey Arjuna, hey Kurunandana. So he recounts all these names in which Krishna used to address him so lovingly. And Arjuna used to tease him. Arjuna says, I used to sit in his bed and I used to play with him. I used to dine with him. I never realized what a companionship I had. And he was always indulging me like a father would indulge a son, a friend would indulge a dear friend. And now, bereft of him, I am without my heart. So, Arjuna brings out this intense feeling of separation for a friend. His mood is so loving, and he is dearly, dearly missing his friend. And we can see how he is able to not even stand this separation for a moment, and he is simply, his heart is going over every single incident that Krishna was there as a guiding light protecting him. And finally he says, I have the same Gandiva bow, all my arrows are the same, my chariot is the same, the horses are the same, I am the same Arjuna, and yet now nobody would even fear me for a second. And he, in fact, recounts that on his way, he was defeated by a bunch of cowherd men when he was on his way back from Dwaraka to Hastinapura. That's how weak he has become without the companionship of Krishna. So, bereft of the Lord, I am reduced to nothing in a moment. And he says, I am like an oblation poured into ashes. So, when ghee or butter is poured into fire, it burns, but when it's poured into ashes, it simply becomes nothing. So, he says, I am like this ghee poured into ash, or like a seed thrown in a barren land. That's how I have become now, he cries. One of the important things to notice here is the mood of Arjuna. We always chant this verse, Nigama Kalpataror Galitam, which says Rasam. Rasa means mood or taste. And there are five predominant tastes of devotion. And all these five tastes are displayed with increasing levels of intimacy. And especially in the case of Krishna, all the five come into play. The most distant way is the one of awe and adoration. So, normally, in many traditions and even in many aspects of divine, this is the only aspect that is there. The sense of opulence and adoration and great respect and even fear and just being awe inspired. So, to some extent, Bhishma, we saw already, represented that. Vidura represented that. They were all distant from Krishna in the sense that they know Krishna's supreme nature and they know his opulences and they always had tremendous love and devotion for him in the mood of respect. Then the next more intimate mood is the mood of service, where one takes the position of a servant and does whatever the Lord bids one to do. And that is the mood we saw Yudhishthira has. And there are many, Hanuman is well known for that. Yudhishthira has the same mood where he considers his entire rule to be a service to Krishna. And he does everything only by asking Krishna. He serves Krishna, but he still is a little distant. But then the more sweeter mood, which is the mood of Arjuna, is the mood of a dear friend. That's why among the Pandavas, Arjuna alone had this special relationship because to him, Krishna was not a distant Lord to be respected or even to be served, but to be simply a friend. He was so dear and he treated him as a friend. They joked with each other. And yet, when the time came, Krishna always was there for Arjuna to protect him in all possible ways, and most importantly, to give him the wonderful instruction of Bhagavad Gita and also to show his cosmic form. But otherwise, he was always making Arjuna forget, as it were, that he was the supreme being and being his close friend. Even more intimate than that is the mood of a parent to a son, which is the mood in which Yashoda related to Krishna, where she was even scolding Krishna and even sometimes beating Krishna like a child or tying him up with a rope. We saw Kunti refer to that it is such a wonder that you were acting like you were afraid of your mother, though you are the Lord of the universe. So that's the sweetness of Yashoda, that she not only, Arjuna was making fun as a friend, but Yashoda even chastised Krishna, punished him. That's the liberty Yashoda took. And even sweeter than that, the most intimate is what's called Madhurya Bhava, which is the mood of conjugal loving relationship that the gopis had, Radha and all the gopis had, where there is the intimacy of the highest kind with Krishna. So all these five moods, they are called as Shantarasa, the mood of Bhishma, one of peaceful, loving devotion. Dasya Rasa, the one of servitude as Yudhishthira or Hanuman. And then Sakhya Rasa, which is what Arjuna has, this deep friendship. Then Vatsalya Rasa, which is the mood of parental love, maternal love, which Yashoda and Nanda had. And then finally Madhurya, which is the love of gopis, of Radha and also Rukmini and so on. So all these moods of love are uniquely exhibited in Krishna's pastimes alone, and thereby making it such a wholesome object of devotion. Every aspect of Krishna, every mood of Krishna is available. Whichever mood one can relate to, through that one can completely devote oneself and be lost in the love of Krishna. So Arjuna is lost in this mood of friendship, and we can see him pour his heart out. And he also says the Yadus were destroyed, by the way, because Yudhishthira asked about the Yadu dynasty, the Yadavas. He says all the Yadavas too killed each other because Krishna orchestrated for the burden of earth to be reduced by making his own race kill each other, the race which is known for being very pious. By Krishna's will, they one day took to drinking and thereby started attacking each other because Krishna wanted the whole race to be terminated. So, except for a handful, almost all of them were killed. And all I'm left with now is just the separation of Govinda. And I am now recounting again, Arjuna says, the instruction I received in the battlefield, he is remembering the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, I have been fortunate to receive this most wonderful instruction right in the battlefield, and now I am remembering that again, all these instructions. Krishna has said in Bhagavad Gita himself that he gives forgetfulness and remembrance. So now, in this moment, Arjuna is again given the remembrance of the most profound Bhagavad Gita. And he says, finally, that because of this, I am now completely absorbed in the feet of Lord Vasudeva. And then he goes silent. And then Suta Maharishi, who's recounting this to the rishis, he says that immediately Arjuna, who is also called Jishnu, fell completely silent, and his mind became, he had, as we saw, poured his heart out, cried, and all his emotions came out. And now there was a complete silence. His mind became tranquil, filled with intense devotion, and whatever impurities that were there, whatever desires that were there, everything was wiped clean in that moment of total silence after the outpouring of his heart. And he was contemplating exclusively on the feet of Lord Vasudeva, recollecting the Bhagavad Gita. And he says here, Suta Maharishi says, the veil of Maya was now completely withdrawn for Arjuna, and he recognized and realized his true nature. He got the wealth of Brahman, the pure awareness, and all duality was resolved, and Arjuna was completely now at peace. He says here, Vishoko Brahma Sampatya Samchinna Dvaita Samshaya. Vishoko, he is freed of all sorrow now after expressing immense sorrow at separation. Finally, he attained peace. All sorrow evaporated. He recognized his true nature by contemplating on Bhagavad Gita that he heard from his dear friend Vasudeva, and he attained the wealth of Brahman and Dvaita Samshayaha Samchinna. The all duality, the doubts of duality completely destroyed. And this is how Arjuna became peaceful. So, seeing this entire narration, listening to this, and then now seeing Arjuna become so quiet, Yudhishthira also resolved that this is it. This marks the end of everything. And Kunti, who is there, who's listening, we already saw how devoted Kunti is to Krishna, and she's got a tender heart full of love. And so, listening to this heartfelt narration of Arjuna about the Lord's departure, she simply fixed her mind exclusively on Krishna and just left her body right there. It says, Ekanta Bhaktya Bhagavat Adhokshaje. Adhokshaje is the one who's beyond all senses. And in him who is beyond all senses, Ekanta Bhaktya, with single minded devotion, she fixed her heart and she simply left in the most glorious way in that very instant. And Yudhishthira also recognized that this is the beginning of Kali Yuga now, because he had already noticed all the bad omens of how people have started behaving and how nature is behaving and all that. So he sees all this, he sees his mother beautifully attaining samadhi, absorbed in Krishna now, his brother becoming completely quiet. The whole place is now surcharged with a totally different energy, a divine energy. And Yudhishthira instantly, without any second thought, decides that he will relinquish the throne. He will install Parikshit, the grandson, as the emperor. And instantly he arranges for the coronation of Parikshit as the emperor. And once Parikshit is installed, Yudhishthira immediately leaves the palace. He leaves all his fine clothes, all his jewelry, and most importantly, he leaves the sense of I and mine. It says here, Nirmamo Nirahankaraha Samchinna Ashesha Bandhanaha. He is free of I, he is free of mind, he is free of all worldly ties, and he simply leaves the palace. This is a grand tradition of Bharat that has been there forever. We will see in Bhagavatam over and over that every ruler, every noble king, at some point leaves the palace, leaves power voluntarily, not cling on to it till dying, but voluntarily leaves power and goes to solitude and focuses on the highest purpose of God realization after installing the appropriate younger person in the throne. So, this is a great lesson for rulers that they ought to, at some point, walk away voluntarily rather than cling to power till dying. Yudhishthira demonstrates it as so many other kings have done, which we will see later. So, he is free of all ties now. He walks away and he simply, just as we saw Dhritarashtra do by the grace of Vidura, here Yudhishthira also similarly, his mind is fully fixed in devotion to Hari, and through this devotion, his heart is completely purified, and thereby his intellect, his buddhi, is seeing clearly that there is no sense of separate I. That's why he is nirmamo nirahankaraha. The sense of separation has completely vanished. And then this intellect, which is so purified, merges in the heart, which is the Paramatma, and the heart recognizes that this is the same truth that is everywhere, which is the pure awareness Brahman. So, Bhagavan devotion leads to realizing Paramatman in the heart and Brahman as the space of awareness that pervades everyone and everything. So, in this way, Yudhishthira recognizes his truth and he becomes silent. He walks away and he doesn't look back. He goes in the northern direction, just as Dhritarashtra had done some time back. Now Yudhishthira walks in the northern direction, and seeing that his other brothers too, and Arjuna as well, they follow the elder brother and they also walk into oblivion, into not being known to what is going to happen, not waiting for anyone else, into obscurity, and they simply hold to Krishna in their heart, the Lord of Vaikuntha, and clinging to that in their heart and their mind with exclusive devotion, they realize their truth as verily the same Supreme Being, that is Krishna, that is Narayana, and they walk away. So it says here, Tasmin Narayana Pade Ekanta Matayo Gatim. With a single pointed intellect, single pointed heart, Ekanta Matayo, they realize their gati, their abode as Narayana, as the Supreme Being, who is both the personal loving form of Vasudeva Krishna and the impersonal awareness that is Brahman, and thereby they attain the highest abode. Meanwhile, Vidura, we already saw, he also had continued his pilgrimage after Dhritarashtra realized his self and left the body. Now, Vidura too leaves his body. He has gone to Dwaraka and there he leaves his body. He is the last remaining brother, the uncle of the Pandavas, and he also leaves the body. And last but not the least, by any means, Draupadi, the devout wife who is always devoted to Krishna, just as Kunti was in the sweetest way, fully surrendered. She also sees that the king has gone with total detachment, and she also collects herself completely, fixes her heart in Krishna, and thereby she also attains the eternal abode. It says here, Draupadi Chetadagnyaya Patinam Apekshatam Vasudeve Bhagavatihi Ekanta Matirapatam. She also, with a single minded devotion, looking at her king leave and looking at all the events that have happened, her mind completely in Vasudeva, she attains the highest truth. Thereby, all the Pandavas, this is the greatness of Pandavas, they never thought they achieved anything. They were the greatest warrior, king, archer, wrestler, each one of them. And yet they never thought they achieved anything on their own. They always knew that everything was only because of Krishna. And they always ascribed everything to Krishna. They surrendered to Krishna at every step of the way. And when Krishna has departed earth, they immediately, instantly recognize their job is done. And without any clinging, they simply install Parikshit in the throne, and all of them depart gracefully. Bhagavatam says that listening to this very chapter is so special. It says here, he who listens with reverence to this most sacred and blessed story of the ascent of Pandavas, who is beloved to the Lord, develops devotion to Hari and attains perfection. See, it's called as Palashruti. The fruit of listening to this is not anything to acquire, but only attaining devotion to Hari. And that is the greatest thing to get. So simply listening to this episode we listened today, Bhagavatam says, purifies the heart and develops pure devotion for Hari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.